And just doing a quick video here about the deceptiveness of some coronal mass ejections. So sometimes we see coronal mass ejections, folks, that show up on one of the instruments and looks a little bit deceptive. So here's a quick little video about that. So what we're looking at here is the LASCO C3 instrument. So this is on the SOHO spacecraft, and it looks a little bit like a coronal mass ejection directed toward the Earth, right? You can see it's coming out in pretty much all directions there, a little bit to the south, but it looks like it's could be a halo, sort of a coronal mass ejection. Is it headed toward Earth? Well, this is a prime example of why we use multiple different instruments to figure this out. So this may look like it's headed toward Venus here, which is the planet that you see in the foreground, but I assure you that it is not. So here we're going to show you another view, the LASCO C2. So here's a closer view of that coronal mass ejection, which was all too real, but not Earth-facing. And we'll show you why in a moment here. You can see once again on the LASCO C2, it looks a lot like a halo ejection there, like it is indeed headed toward you, the viewer. And the LASCO C2, like the C3, is located 1 million miles closer to the Sun than the Earth at Lagrangian point 1 is where that spacecraft orbits. So, last but not least, let's look at stereo A, which is at Lagrangian point 5, several weeks behind the Earth, orbitally speaking. And you can see on this image here that the coronal mass ejection indeed was on the opposite side of the Sun. So, Earth would be out in this direction from the viewpoint of Lagrange point 5. And there's a view of that quite significant coronal mass ejection and why it is not Earth-facing. So a great view of that far side of the Sun coronal mass ejection from the view of Lagrange point 5, and why that can be very deceptive. So just a short video about that, and that's why we use all of those different instruments. You can find all this stuff yourself. Don't take my word for it at the Integrated Space Weather Analysis Center, or ISWA. And we'll close out the video with the LASCO C3 showing that coronal mass ejection propagate, along with Venus, from the SOHO spacecraft LASCO C3. So just a little tidbit there into the inner workings of how coronal mass ejections, at least after they've occurred, are forecasted in terms of their directional telemetries, the astrography of where each of those coronal mass ejections heads. And that one, although it does look a lot like an Earth-facing one, is indeed not Earth-facing. So that's about it, folks. I just figured I would just show that real quick, as we don't do very much behind-the-scenes stuff. But indeed, that was a coronal mass ejection that occurred at about 12:30 Universal Time yesterday on the 16th.